In the end, the girl still fell asleep right in class, absolutely not embarrassed by the teacher and everyone else. In her mind, there were still vague fragments from her past life, where she was gullible and unremarkable. She looked at the guy in surprise when he suddenly offered her to go and eat at his expense. He still insisted on his own, and they had lunch together until he suddenly announced that he wanted coffee, knowing that she would pay. Her mood immediately changed when the guy announced that he wanted a new drink that was twice the price of their breakfast. Deborah's eyes widened in fright, as if she had woken up from a terrible dream that had tormented her for years. She instantly stood up, but suddenly felt her head resting on an unknown object. This object turned out to be the same handsome man who boldly reminded her that the lesson was over. The girl looked around in surprise, unexpectedly catching herself thinking about how this guy could be so handsome. Despite his deliberately friendly appearance, Deborah asked him rudely who he was. Trying to smooth out the corners, he asked her if she really did not know who he was, which immediately caused a heap of attempts to remember. After a couple of long seconds, he finally realized her bewilderment and introduced himself, calling himself Isidore Visconti. Deborah remembered that he was the favorite of all those girls and assumed that he would be successful in Korea. Asking him what exactly he wanted, she stared at the sheets of material he had handed her. In her mind, an association immediately arose with the same guy who had cruelly used her before. Deborah stopped, realizing that she had met that scoundrel in the same way. To her surprise, he only asked if she was having a nightmare, given the way she frowned in her sleep. Isidore deliberately approached his acquaintance, almost insisting that they have lunch or drink tea. Not understanding the reason for his benevolent behavior, Deborah stood up, declaring that she did not have time. No sooner had he tried to detain her than she immediately slipped out of the office. Embarrassed, Deborah herself did not understand how she left the office because his presence caused a strong excitement in her. Realizing what was happening to her, she immediately called herself an idiot, since at one time she became an ATM for that guy. The girl was tearing the hair on her head tiredly, catching herself thinking that she would ruin her family if she fell for Isidore's bait. Meanwhile, the guy himself was clearly dissatisfied with the result of their meeting, which was unsuccessful. Standing behind him, Miguel awkwardly asked if he was going to dine with someone, causing him to think that he was mocking. Isidore was not going to put up with his claim that the method had failed, stating that his beauty could not fail. He paled when the assistant started talking about how he wasn't Deborah's type and that she liked Philip better. He recalled that she was so crazy that she even tried to spread rumors about their wedding. Isidore noted with displeasure that it was she who started these rumors, trying to attract the guy. Realizing that he was feeling upset, he said that he still had a lot in store, so there was no point in clinging to beauty. After listening to Miguel's suggestion about the first failure, he confidently stated that he had not even begun to show his charm yet. After a while, Deborah's day began with her standing in bewilderment at a booth with information about clubs. Due to the fact that their academy is based on social learning, and for this reason social clubs have been created in it, she thought thoughtfully that all the nobles wanted to join a prestigious social club and improve their reputation. The main difference was that men join fraternities and women join women's social clubs. She also recalled that in the plot, her character tried to intimidate Mia in a women's club and ruined her reputation. Deborah knew that to join, you need to have a good reputation and character, as well as be in a good family. She understood that she had neither, because of which she could get into a miserable class and cause condemnation. The consequence of this terrible incident may be an even more terrible wedding with Louis Gazelle. The girl again hysterically began to pull her hair, feeling an increased pain in her head because of all these thoughts. She was forced to distract herself from her problems when she heard an unexpected screech from the crowd of ladies. Deborah looked closely, seeing the handsome man in the middle of them all. She looked at the whole picture in bewilderment, trying to understand what was going on here. Deborah froze, mesmerized by one important detail in everything that was happening. She noticed that in this new coat he looked so impressive and attractive, as if she saw some halo of magic behind her. No sooner had she fled the scene than his eyes were immediately drawn to Deborah, who was standing in the backyard. Their puzzled eyes suddenly crossed, provoking a new surge of surprise. Isidore burned her with his gaze so perceptibly that she could not move from her place from awkwardness. She was even more surprised when, for no reason at all, he began to happily wave his hand to her, greeting her. She gasped in surprise, not understanding what exactly he wanted from her and why he was greeting her so openly. Noticing his attentive gaze, she also assumed that he could have seen that she was looking at him. To the surprise of all the girls present, he casually offered Deborah tea if she had time. The girl tried to brush it off, reminding him that he already had someone to drink tea with, but he stopped it, telling him not to worry about other people. Noticing her incredulity, he said that he was very sorry to hear her refuse. She looked at him in surprise when she heard him say that he wanted to discuss joining a social club with her. Despite trying to keep her attention with the conversation, Deborah still suggested that they postpone the conversation until later. Agreeing to a small promotion, he replied with a smile that he would wait for this moment. Meanwhile, it was time for a new lesson for the girl, where most of the students again decided to sit down from her. She happily noticed that the more she ignored everyone, the more everyone was afraid of her. Everyone was forced to fall silent when they saw two teachers modestly enter the office. After analyzing the gait of one of them, she assumed that he was a student of the Faculty of Engineering. The girl was thinking about her career prospect without mastering magic until she heard a palpable knock. A stern professor of magical formulas appeared in front of them, standing in the middle of a pile of papers. He immediately decided to intimidate students, saying that it would be very difficult for those who did not want to study in his subject. Kyle considered the best solution to give them an easy test, after writing which they could leave. Deborah felt frightened, realizing that with her knowledge it would be very difficult for her to pass it. She immediately assumed her father's reaction if she changed her major and chose a different path. The girl frantically tried to come up with a way out of this situation, until one important detail caught her attention. Looking at the examples written on the blackboard, she wondered why they were so easy. Sometime after writing the test, the professor commented on the perfectly correct form in bewilderment. Another assistant modestly replied that it was Deborah's letterhead, which apparently forced someone to do the tasks for her. Not believing that she could write the test herself, Kyle frantically considered how to punish her for cheating. To his surprise, he was told that she was the first to write the test and left without contact with others. Still not believing that she had such knowledge, Kyle disdainfully threw her form on the floor. He trampled on him, saying that she was just lucky, including being born into the Seymour family. In the meantime, the girl decided to improve her knowledge by studying the necessary materials in the library. A clerk assigned to the library immediately asked her what exactly she was looking for. Deciding to prick the girl, he haughtily said that there were only books about magic, and there were no romance novels popular among ladies. Deborah was outraged at how he dared to talk to her and decided to express her indignation. She turned and pierced him with her cold gaze, accusing him of slow-wittedness. Catching him in arrogance, she said that he was not competent enough in this matter to give her advice. She smiled slyly when he suggested that she check it out, ordering her to name any book. The servant was taken aback by her pressure when she named the book with different third-class formulas, and he had to find it quickly. Deborah knew he couldn't find her, and she gave him a disappointed look. Finally, she waved her finger triumphantly, saying that he had only heard too much about her. After a while, Deborah finally achieved her original goal and sat thoughtfully in the middle of the books. She knew that the servant had no manners, and she had taught him a little lesson, making her think that she would soon become a rag. Deborah changed her mind, remembering the face of the frightened butler. She finally began to study the material, previously surprised at how large the book was. The girl thoughtfully went through the many pages occupied by the address and the introduction. In the end, she finally found a page with the cherished third-class magic formula. She remembered that a long time ago, in order for an archmage to fully use his magic, he had to learn specific formulas. The girl thoughtfully flipped through the pages, getting acquainted with the very formulas used in antiquity. She came to the conclusion that high magic is a geometric progression according to what is written in the book. Its brief content contained a list of actions necessary to make magic a material sphere. Thus, she realized that magic is very much related to mathematics, which she studied during her engineering studies. She was mentally happy with her math education, because it was thanks to this that she was able to solve the test. Despite this, she still couldn't understand why there were no specific formulas in this book. She was brought out of her thoughts by an unexpected guest, who instantly caused a wave of surprise in the girl. She peeked out slowly, trying to find the newcomer with her eyes, but was startled to see Enrique there. Without leaving her hiding place, Deborah noticed that with a new hairstyle and bangs, he looked even prettier. The girl continued to follow his actions, trying to understand why he was jumping and looking for something on the shelves. She was shocked to realize that he was desperately trying to jump to the book he needed, compensating for his small stature. Enrique was utterly confused by the realization that he still could not get the object he wanted. Deborah decided to intervene and help her younger brother by pulling out the very book he was trying to jump to. Finally, with a cunning smile, she handed the boy a book, surprising him with her beneficence. He gasped in shock, still not believing in her appearance, given the previous problems in their relationship. Before he had time to rejoice, he was immediately pierced by Deborah's cold gaze, which by default provokes fear. His reaction immediately made Deborah think that she shouldn't have touched him or made him embarrassed. The boy looked at his sister with displeasure, asking her if she had been following him. Deborah only stated with a smile that she had really watched him as he was very cute. At first, Enrique did not understand what exactly the girl meant, so she repeated what she had said, calling him cute. He continued to stare at the girl in surprise that she compared him to a cute little rabbit. Deborah couldn't stop feeling touched by how brightly her brother reacted to everything. Enrique embarrassedly declared that he would become as tall as his older brothers, which strongly reminded him of a ferocious kitten. He was even more taken aback after Deborah ruffled his hair in a sisterly way. The boy's face flushed with embarrassment, causing his cheeks to instantly flush. Unable to tolerate this, he immediately ran out of the library, shouting that it was too much. While Deborah was awkwardly aware that she had been mistaken again, Enrique was trying to catch his breath in the middle of the courtyard. Memories of the phrases spoken by Deborah, from whom he had never heard anything like it before, continued to flicker through his mind. He kept trying to pull himself together, instilling the idea that she was laughing at his short stature. Remembering the sad episodes from his childhood after the death of his mother, he still could not believe that Deborah could say something like this. At that time, the Duke was immersed in his work, not wanting to give him any influence, so he was constantly told to be quiet. All this time, he continued to feel an unbearable sense of guilt, reinforced by the attitude of his cold father. The day after the incident, Deborah arrived as if nothing had happened to pick up the cake in a notorious pastry shop. Obviously, this was just an excuse to get back into the office and talk to the master. Deborah was surprised to see the teleporter in the middle of the room, which immediately raised many questions about the details of its installation. Upon learning that he could carry 5 people, the resolute girl succumbed to teleportation. At last they found themselves in the middle of a spacious hall full of huge doors. No sooner had they opened the door and gone inside than Deborah was immediately swooped down by the mage's bored pet. Cookie was thrilled that her favorite guest had finally come to visit her, taking a bag of catnip with her. Deborah herself was happy with the pressure of the predator who fell in love with her, but still she was forced to tear herself away when she heard his voice. The owner of Cookie only calmly ordered her to go to him while leaning on the doorway. To his indignation, the characteristic cat never responded to his order, clinging to the girl again. He was visibly puzzled by her behavior as Deborah rediscovered that cats couldn't get rid of the drug. In the end, the girl still moved to the sofa inside the office, but Cookie was not going to leave her there either. The master watched this sweet couple wearily, being forced to watch as Cookie tamed Debord. He decided to regain her attention, starting by asking if she thought her pet was cute. The girl decided to get straight to the point, reminding him that by this time he should have already finished with the magic bag. The mage looked thoughtfully at Deborah, who said that they were not in the right relationship to discuss other things. Throwing a bag at the girl, he calmly replied that he wanted their relationship to develop a little. After waiting for her to open it, the guy explained that she could just put the object there and calmly reach it with her hand. He warned that nothing could be seen in it, but even this did not affect Deborah's general delight towards this thing. She looked warily at the master as he asked her to hold out her hand. At first, she was indignant that she was not a puppy, but still agreed when she heard that he needed to put a mark. Looking at her hand, the guy said that in his opinion she still belongs more to the cat family. Deborah didn't quite understand what she was talking about, but she looked at him in surprise, more like a cat. No sooner had she been indignant than she was immediately blinded by the bright glow of the seal placed on her hand. For some reason, her attention was focused on how big his hands were holding back her palm. She immediately looked at him as a man with long fingers who played the piano well. As soon as the thought flashed through her head that he matched her ideal type of man according to these characteristics, he finished with the seal. The mage handed her a small piece of paper with a spell, after which he noticed that she had decided not to wear the pink diamond after all. Deborah was taken aback when he suggested that she was trying to achieve this, as the nobles became more interested in him after that. He smiled contentedly when she finally confirmed his hunches while hiding her true motive. The master decided to move on to her next request, reminding her that if it hadn't been for it, she would have left long ago. Deborah looked at her interlocutor thoughtfully, feeling as if he was offended by something about her. She resolutely looked ahead, saying that she wanted to know about one person. The magician hatched in surprise at Deborah, not believing that she had mentioned the name of Isidore Visconti so that he would find out about him. He asked thoughtfully what was the reason for her desire to know about him. The girl immediately felt a certain sense of the atmosphere hovering between them after she said this name. She suggested that it would be difficult to find out about him because he is the heir of a noble family. The magus was stunned to hear how honestly she shared her opinion of his personality, calling him suspicious. The The room immediately overflowed with an aura of indignation, causing him to be disgusted that he might be suspicious. Feeling slightly nervous, he stated that he could tell about his height and weight, as well as even the size of his leg. Deborah was shocked when he dreamily went on to talk about how Isidore might be a little vulnerable, but he was pretty confident. Not wanting to endure it any longer, she rushed from her seat, indignantly asking who he took her for. He looked at her with a deliberately frightened look, not understanding why she needed gossip about him instead of the information he had provided. The girl stared at him indignantly, trying to understand why he was so surprised. She again ordered him to investigate carefully and report to her about the rumors she had discovered. His face twisted unpleasantly as Deborah spoke of Isidore Visconti as if he were a dubious person. While the girl thought that she needed to find out about it due to the lack of information in the book, the magician put down the cup with a bang. She was surprised to see how abruptly and impulsively he began to place sugar in the tea while pouring it out at the same time. His antics didn't end there, so the next thing he did was indiscriminately pour tea into a mug, obviously pouring it over. Finally, he slammed the kettle loudly on the table, declaring that he understood her. The magician repeated almost maniacally that he needed to find out about Isidore Visconti because he was suspicious. His behavior remained a mystery to Deborah, so she still couldn't understand the reason for his passive aggression. As he tried to escort her out, he heard that she was staying behind to finish her tea, after which he said that each mug would cost 1 gold piece. Hearing the argument that it was a very expensive tea, Deborah handed him the gem that the mage refused. She still couldn't understand why his mood was changeable, showing passive aggression. Their altercation continued, and he casually asked about how she tamed Kuki, eventually receiving the answer that she would not tell him. She smiled when he caught her being stubborn after she said that answering that question would hurt her business. In the end, she proudly held out the sheet with her palm, urging the master to take a look at her creation. When she heard him say that it was an unusual and very unique drawing, she smiled proudly and agreed with him. He didn't even know that she had stolen the logo from a company that was very popular in her past world. When asked if she had drawn it herself, Deborah proudly replied that she did, while keeping silent about the fact that she had done it in class. He called her idea grandiose after hearing the announcement that she wanted to open a dessert shop with this logo. The girl was not going to stop at only one such store, so she wanted to open more than 100 of them around the city. Proudly pointing to the logo, she said that she would make people reflexively remember it when looking at the color purple. The magus was very surprised to hear that her idea would also be to allow others to take the name of her shop. She understood that it was necessary to make her store popular so that people who were afraid to take risks could take popular menus and interiors. According to the girl's calculations, this franchise will bring her good interest for the use of her property. The master immediately grasped the whole meaning, realizing that the more places opened, the greater the profit would be. Deborah was only once again convinced of his ingenuity, seeing how quickly he calculated all the risks and shortcomings. She explained that she only shares it with him because she wants to invest in the place and work with it. After some time, the girl still left the master, leaving him with a whole bunch of thoughts and doubts. He was forced to distract himself from the abyss of thoughts when he heard the words of the assistant that he had been given a very difficult task. Miguel smiled innocently, declaring that this time he had to do everything personally. When he heard a disgruntled question about whether he was amused by this situation, he slyly replied that he wasn't, mentally laughing at him. Miguel understood that if he did not hold back his laughter, the mage would kill him, so he continued to restrain himself with the last of his strength. When asked why he hadn't asked for more money, the master only replied that he had already received enough. He understood that this was a unique offer, because while other aristocrats did not want to take up the business, she offered to become partners. Rereading the contract with a smile, the mage said contentedly that she was great, while realizing that she seemed more and more unusual to him. Miguel continued to hold back his laughter, not understanding what could be written in the contract to make him laugh like that. Thoughtfully sorting through the stones in the bracelet, he asked the guy what kind of outfit Deborah might like. Miguel correctly noted that she always looked at him with indifference, until she saw him in a manly frock coat. Changing his appearance, he noticed with a smile that, in this case, he had clothes that he had never wore and their time had come. The day came when Deborah was forced to come to the academy, unaware of the master's plan to conquer her. Trying to look as indifferent as possible, she still felt that she could not see anything because of this handsome man. She remembered that Bellic had originally pioneered this style, but this man in glasses had passed him. His abrupt change in style caused a stir among young people, after which they were only surprised at how many people were repeating after him. Deborah suggested that Isidore himself was tired of this, being forced to constantly change his style. Despite this, the abrupt change in his images allowed stores to earn more, taking advantage of the demand for such clothes. In the end, guided by Deborah's thoughts, she herself did not realize how somehow she was magically lost. She knew that usually a servant helped in such cases, but she did not have her right arm, since no one could stand it. The girl thoughtfully recalled the plot of the novel, where about this year 2 new maids came. During Deborah's trial, they complained about her, saying that she made them do bad things. Hearing the sounds, she was inwardly happy, not even knowing that she would meet Mia Benicia there. There was an awkward pause between them, as neither girl expected to see each other in such a place. Like Deborah, Mia stared at her in surprise without saying a word. Realizing that she should quickly leave her, Deborah did not have time to take a couple of steps when she heard a sudden crash. Stumbling, Mia hit the ground painfully, which forced her to ask the girl for help. The girl stood in front of her opponent in confusion, asking for help and just getting up. Deborah was surprised that although she had such a strong divine power, she still couldn't heal herself. No sooner had she leaned over to help Mia than she was immediately noticed by Philip, who flew out to meet her. He immediately rudely pushed the girl away from his beloved, inquiring about her condition. Obviously, he immediately assumed that it was Deborah who had harmed her by deliberately pushing her to the ground. She just rubbed the back of her head wearily, putting up with the thought that she knew it would be so. Confident in his rightness, Philip looked at Deborah with a kind of cruelty, not ceasing to drown her in accusations. The girl couldn't understand what he was talking about when he began to say that even though she was obsessed with him, she shouldn't have done it anyway. Deborah tried to explain to him that she was trying to help, as Mia tripped near a tree and fell. She demanded confirmation that this was true, while inwardly indignant that she was doing what she was silently watching. Before Mia had time to agree with her, he immediately accused her of deliberately forcing the girl to say what was necessary. Philip continued to look at Deborah contemptuously as he listened to her, still trying to prove the reality to him. Releasing his magical power, he looked at the girl menacingly, calling all her words ordinary nonsense. To her surprise, Deborah's body began to react strangely, making it increasingly difficult for her to defend herself. Their eyes met as he again ordered her to apologize immediately for what she had not done. No sooner had she been frightened by how naughty her body was, than Isidore immediately saved her, covering her with his body. She looked at his face in surprise, not believing that Isidore Visconti himself had gone to help her. Philip brazenly ordered him to stop talking and move away, not realizing that he clearly did not intend to give in to such an impudent man. Visconti only looked at the guy excitedly, saying that he could not pass by the one who threatened the lady. Hearing this, he only asked him directly how much he had already seen. Isidore mockingly replied that from the moment he boasted that he had been chosen by the gods of the spirits of water and fire. Unable to endure this ridicule, Philip burned with anger, covering the entire space around him with fire. Deborah was shocked to see how quickly Isidore responded as he extinguished the fool's magical flames. He excitedly drew his sword, unleashing huge streams of magical power. The man expressed composure as he confronted the impulsive Philip. Unlike him, he was clearly dissatisfied with how worthily Visconti answered him. Meanwhile, Deborah herself was clearly shocked that such an ordinary incident could result in such a large-scale conflict. Mia was frightened and tried to get through to Philip, saying that she had nothing to breathe because of his strength. Isidore and Deborah sighed tiredly when they saw that it stopped and went out like a candle. Not accepting defeat, Philip turned to his opponent and said that he could not understand him. Deborah still couldn't figure out who exactly she had offended when he reiterated that she had hurt Mia while no one was looking. In the end, he still left, which would definitely force both her and him to apologize. Isidore only said with a smirk that despite this, for some reason the instigator himself was silent when he himself shouted at the top of his lungs. Mia froze in fright when he turned to her, asking if Deborah had done something worth apologizing for. Philip twisted with anger when the girl replied tersely that she did not. Finally, he called it impermissible how a miss from an unknown family could force Deborah to apologize for not doing anything. The girl clearly did not expect that she could hear something like this openly. Deborah was pleased to notice that there was a lot to learn from him, for he was well versed in what to say and how to respond. In the end, he told him that since they had nothing more to say, then they had to go. He also reminded him of Mia's injured knees, reminding him that he should check on her. Realizing that he had nothing more to answer, he threatened Isidore that he would regret what he had done. Philip nevertheless left, leaving his detractors alone with their thoughts. Forgetting about the impulsive guy, Isidore immediately turned to Deborah anxiously, asking about her well-being. Putting up with a strong feeling of awkwardness, the girl answered him tersely that yes, Feeling like the culprit of the fight, Deborah was forced to stop when she saw Isidore leaning towards her. Hearing his remark that she had turned pale, the girl only tried to brush it off, saying that she had always had such skin. In an attempt to pull away, Deborah stumbled, but was immediately caught in the safe hands of her companion. Seeing this attempt to convince him that everything was fine, he only looked at the girl's face anxiously. She was surprised to hear him say that she didn't know how to lie at all. Then he invited her to go back and held out his hand, asking her not to be stubborn. Deborah looked at his face thoughtfully, realizing that when she stood with Philip, he seemed windy, not cold-blooded as he was now. For some reason, she felt as if he was angry with her, but she still put her hand into his. Squeezing the man's hand, she asked him bluntly why he had decided to help her, but he only replied that he was a knight. In the end, they returned to the main square, which was full of many carriages. Deborah felt very uncomfortable, unable to get rid of the man's grasping hands. She looked at Isidore in surprise when he, having ordered Miguel to open the carriage, asked him to forgive him in advance. The man did not dignify her with an answer and immediately took her in his arms, forcing her to hold on to his shoulders. He carefully moved the girl into the carriage, wishing the shocked Deborah a good trip. She was smitten on the spot, feeling such perseverance and masculinity of a man she liked. When he heard her say that she was now in his debt, he only replied with a smile that it was enough for her to say thank you. After a pause, Deborah thanked Isidore, surprising him with her gratitude. He still could not believe that he had waited and heard such words from a girl with a special character. Deborah herself could not understand why she could surprise the man who helped her out so much. Finally, he explained himself, saying that it was an honor for him to help her. Hearing the door slam, the girl rubbed her temples in fright, trying to understand what she had done. Visconti finally stated that it would be good if she pointed the radar to normal men. At first, Deborah clearly did not understand what exactly he meant and spent a couple of minutes in thought, trying to understand the meaning of his words. Realizing what exactly he said, the girl began to burn with embarrassment as she realized that he was hinting at the situation with Philip. She spent the rest of the road in sediment, mentally arguing with what Philip was to her liking. Meanwhile, Isidore similarly pondered what had happened between them, realizing that her love for Philip had a long history. He remembered how sincerely Deborah had thanked him, which made his cheeks instantly flush.